It's those tiny wins that can act like stepping stones. Stepping stones across the vast river of your ambitions. Each small success carrying you closer to major breakthroughs. They might look insignificant at first. Crossing a simple task off your list, finishing a quick routine, or sticking to a short daily habit for a few days in a row. But their effect can ripple well beyond the act itself. Instead of waiting for some grand milestone to feel accomplished, you learn to celebrate these small victories that appear in the fabric of your everyday life. Each time you consciously acknowledge a tiny win, you reinforce a pattern of progress, creating momentum that can spark new ideas, stronger motivation, and a deeper belief in your capacity to follow through. Over time, these micro successes accumulate into visible results, be it a more streamlined routine, extra confidence at work, or a more positive outlook on the challenges you face. Even setbacks can carry less weight, because a history of tiny accomplishments reminds you that forward movement is never too far out of reach. And once you grasp how these modest achievements stack up, you shift your approach to each day, spotting new chances to notch a small win rather than waiting for an all-or-nothing scenario. This isn't about lowering standards or being content with mediocrity. It's about recognizing that the journey toward bigger goals often hinges on daily acts that build your resilience, skill, and self-trust, one little step at a time. Tiny wins can reshape your perception of effort, turning what once felt like an arduous slog into a series of mini goals that bring satisfaction each time you hit them. Imagine you have a bigger project looming. Maybe it's a set of tasks, a plan to reorganize your living space, or an ongoing practice you've postponed for too long. If you focus exclusively on the final outcome, you might feel overwhelmed by the distance between where you are and where you want to be. On the other hand, if you intentionally identify small increments, like dedicating a short block of time to one discrete task, or aiming to finish a single section of a larger assignment, it no longer seems insurmountable. You set a brief, manageable target and go for it. Once you complete that tiny piece, you experience a tangible sense of success, even though you haven't yet crossed the overall finish line. Over the course of a day or a week, these little victories add up, fueling motivation in a way that big, distant milestones rarely can. Tying a tiny win to a specific action or time frame helps solidify the habit. Maybe you assign yourself a short practice session in the morning or an afternoon check-in to wrap up a smaller piece of your broader goal. Each completion, though small, confirms that you can set a commitment and honor it. This confirmation begins to challenge any lingering doubts about consistency or self-discipline. Rather than thinking, I never follow through, you see evidence that you managed to follow through on multiple bite-sized tasks in a row. The shift might seem minor, but the implications can be profound. You start identifying as someone who gets things done, bit by bit. Once that identity takes hold, it's easier to set the next mini goal because you trust yourself more. Energy levels rise when you space out small achievements throughout the day. Each time you finalize a tiny portion of your bigger agenda, writing a few paragraphs, sending that overdue message, or clearing a small backlog, you get a micro boost of momentum. Think of it as planting motivational checkpoints in your routine. Where you might otherwise feel a lull in the early afternoon or a drag late at night, the prospect of finishing one more small chunk can push you to persist because a sense of completion is near. This regular dose of success wards off the fatigue that sometimes accompanies longer stretches of work without a feeling of progress. Additionally, those bursts of accomplishment can cut through the monotony that arises when you fixate on a single far-off goal, leaving you uncertain whether your current efforts are making a difference. A useful approach is to track these small successes visibly. That might mean keeping a simple tally or logging each microtask in a notebook. You can, for example, note down every subtask you tackled or daily habit you maintained, no matter how trivial it seems. A short walk, a quick phone call, a bit of reading, or a few lines of writing. As the list grows day by day, the cumulative effect becomes undeniable. When doubt creeps in, am I really making progress? You have a concrete record that proves you are, detail by detail. This record counters the irrational feeling that you're stuck, reminding you that each tiny step has contributed something tangible to your larger aim. Mindset shifts naturally arise once you get accustomed to spotting and celebrating these incremental achievements. Instead of brushing off a minor win as no big deal, you label it as the building block it really is. At first, you might feel awkward congratulating yourself for something so small, like clearing out a single drawer or spending 10 minutes practicing a new language. But soon, you realize that consistent microactions are precisely how long-term mastery or major transformations come to life. In fact, many breakthroughs trace back to an accumulation of minuscule tasks, each reinforcing the next. When you let that sink in, you become more enthusiastic about racking up these mini victories because you see they're not detours, but the actual route to big outcomes. The practice of focusing on small wins tempers perfectionism. If you set your sights only on a grand triumph, like writing an entire book or executing an entire project flawlessly, you risk stagnating from the sheer scale of your aspiration. On the other hand, when you decide you'll finish a short outline today or draft a couple of scenes, you're free to do so imperfectly. That imperfection usually becomes acceptable when the task is small enough. You allow yourself the space to fumble a bit, to try out rough ideas because you know you're dealing with just one piece of a grand puzzle. Over time, the cumulative effect of multiple imperfect small tasks refines your skills. By the end, you might have achieved more than if you'd waited for the perfect moment to handle everything in one polished shot. It's revealing to see how tiny wins shape self-confidence. Each minor accomplishment offers a dose of self-efficacy, proof that you can set a mini target and achieve it. That regular drip of confidence counters the self-doubt that might otherwise say you lack follow-through or discipline. If someone asks how you're making headway on your goals, you can point to daily checkpoints instead of vaguely responding, "I hope to get it done soon." This grounding in actual tasks completed instills a more robust sense of progress. You're not guessing you're on the right track. You see daily evidence which fortifies your belief that bigger wins lie ahead if you maintain the pattern. Tiny wins diversify your sense of success throughout the day. Instead of tying your happiness to one major event, like a final exam or a crucial meeting, where the result may take time to unfold, you embed multiple opportunities for satisfaction into ordinary hours. You might tackle a few minutes of exercise right after waking, cook a healthier meal for lunch, or finalize a short report before dinner. Each is a standalone victory, unconnected to whether some bigger plan is months away from concluding. This approach lowers the emotional risk of investing all your feelings in a singular outcome. Even if that big day eventually goes sideways, Your emotional bank has daily deposits of smaller achievements, so the blow doesn't feel catastrophic. A further benefit is how these small wins reduce resistance to beginning tasks at all. When the job looks huge, it's easy to procrastinate, telling yourself you lack the energy or the perfect conditions. But if you plan to do just one little piece, like reading a few pages, brainstorming for a set number of minutes, or tidying one corner, you minimize the psychological barrier. The commitment seems so minor that you don't bother making excuses. Once you're engaged, you often find yourself doing more than intended. This phenomenon, where starting a tiny task leads to momentum that spills over, can multiply productivity. Even if you stop after your planned sliver, you still walk away with a completed micro goal, fueling a sense of accomplishment rather than guilt. Short reflection sessions can help lock in the impact of each small success. For example, at the end of the day, list any moments you felt proud or relieved, like rearranging a cluttered shelf, practicing a skill for 10 minutes, or handling an email you'd been putting off. Seeing this list forms a narrative of progress that day, countering the negativity bias that might try to highlight only what went wrong. This reflection step, while brief, cements the memory that you did, in fact, achieve multiple positives. It plants seeds of anticipation for the next day's mini goals. By routinely acknowledging these little steps, you teach your mind to value incremental movement, to expect frequent small victories, and thus remain engaged in even the most tedious or slow-burning projects. This habit of celebrating small achievements doesn't eliminate big ambitions. It amplifies them. When you see major breakthroughs in sports, arts, or business, they're nearly always the sum of countless smaller breakthroughs that preceded them. Whether a pianist mastering scales one segment at a time, or an entrepreneur refining a pitch through repeated micro-adjustments, the pattern's the same. By embedding those smaller steps into daily life, you mirror the same process top performers undergo, steadily layering skill upon skill. Eventually, you find yourself able to handle tasks that used to feel unattainable, all because you normalized the process of steady, incremental improvement, instead of chasing an all-or-nothing surge of effort. It's noteworthy how tiny wins relieve pressure. If you only measure success in massive leaps, every day you don't leap can feel wasted. This mindset ironically saps motivation, because you might go weeks without feeling like you accomplished anything real. But if you adopt the perspective that each day can yield multiple micro victories, like tidying a single drawer, taking a short, meaningful walk, or pushing a project one notch forward, you maintain a sense of daily purpose. The normal ups and downs of life matter less because you're no longer pinned to a single bar of high success. You're weaving success into small actions all around you. This consistency helps you bounce back from lower energy days, since you know you can still pick off an easy mini task to remain on track. Crucially, tiny wins create a feedback loop of positive emotion that encourages you to keep experimenting with new challenges. Once you realize you can inch forward consistently, you're more likely to try something that feels slightly beyond your current reach, trusting that you'll break it down if necessary. That dynamic of exploring new territory, observing a small success, and then building on it fosters continual development. Suddenly, tasks that once scared you seem approachable because you no longer demand instant mastery. You just plan to notch incremental gains over time. Each step fortifies your readiness to tackle the next, and the fear of failure diminishes, replaced by an acceptance that minor missteps can be easily corrected with another mini effort tomorrow. None of this suggests ignoring big picture planning. You still benefit from clarity about your overarching objectives or the broader reason you're pursuing a certain path. But layering small achievements into daily life is how you translate grand intentions into concrete motion. If your aim is improved health, for instance, you can't just vow to transform everything at once. Turning your routine upside down might collapse under its own weight. Instead, you integrate small victories, a short stretch routine before breakfast, choosing water instead of a sugary drink at lunch, or walking 10 extra minutes in the afternoon. Over weeks, these minor successes accumulate into a significant lifestyle shift, proving to yourself that change, however gradual, is valid and lasting. Consistency emerges as the key ingredient. Scoring a single tiny win in a week can feel good for that moment, but the real power ignites when these daily or near-daily triumphs become standard. Once your mind is accustomed to completing small tasks or meeting incremental goals as a default behavior, the pattern becomes self-sustaining. You don't need huge bursts of motivation. You just follow the established routine that grants multiple minor wins throughout the week. That approach to life builds resilience because you always have an anchor of success to lean on. Even on tougher days, finishing one small objective keeps you tethered to the feeling that progress never fully stalls. All these observations highlight why paying attention to seemingly inconsequential accomplishments can unlock so much. The repeated sense of, I did something valuable today, transforms your mood, your self-concept, and your desire to set slightly bigger targets next time. Rather than imposing harsh expectations, I must complete it all at once. You create a nurturing environment where productivity thrives in small increments. Over a span of weeks or months, you might be amazed at how these little actions, hardly noticeable in isolation, weave together into the tapestry of a significant achievement. And by the time you reflect on how far you've come, you'll likely credit these daily wins, each one modest, yet mighty, for bridging the gap between dreaming and doing. Momentum from small wins isn't confined to personal tasks. It often ripples into broader spheres, like how you handle teamwork or family obligations. Picture a work project with multiple moving parts. If each teammate sets a tiny goal, like delivering a one-page outline or confirming a single resource, the group quickly amasses real progress. This approach cuts through collective procrastination because everyone sees the immediate payoff of each person's small achievement. Instead of letting the project stall until a big deadline looms, you maintain a sense of consistent advancement where each participant feels they've contributed meaningfully in small bursts. That rhythm can reduce friction within the team since everyone observes tangible steps rather than waiting for a sudden, all-encompassing contribution that might never arrive. The same principle applies at home, where small wins in household routines, from tidying a single countertop to preparing a quick, healthy meal, can shift the atmosphere from chaos to calmer productivity. Tying small victories to triggers in your daily routine encourages them to happen seamlessly. Think about anchoring a brief new habit right after an existing one, like slipping in a few minutes of mindful breathing immediately after brushing your teeth. Because brushing your teeth already sits firmly in your routine. Attaching a micro habit to that anchor helps it stick. Once you finish, you check off the tiny win of having taken a short, mindful pause. No elaborate scheduling needed. Over days, this link grows stronger, making it natural to continue. Each successful repetition is a modest accomplishment that builds consistency, training your mind to appreciate the sense of completion rather than viewing small tasks as meaningless filler. Emphasizing incremental wins can mitigate risk-taking anxiety. Perhaps you want to explore a side business or launch a personal project, but dread the idea of pouring all your resources into something uncertain. By specifying a small daily or weekly target, you avoid putting everything on the line at once. Each step clarifies your concept while letting you confirm you're on the right path or adjust if you detect flaws. Those mini successes, like a workable prototype or a supportive comment from a friend, validate your direction without requiring an all-in gamble. Even if you pivot, you haven't wasted huge chunks of time or resources, and you've gained insights along the way. This notion of tiny wins thrives on self-awareness, spotting moments where a small push can spark bigger outcomes. Instead of waiting for a sudden burst of energy to tackle a major issue, you might realize you can allocate a quarter hour tonight to begin. If you feel initial resistance, remind yourself that it's only a quarter hour. That minimal commitment not only gets the ball rolling, but often exceeds itself. Once engaged, you tend to continue. And if you stop after exactly 15 minutes, you still have a minor victory secured, so the day isn't wasted. This approach flips your mindset from, I need a solid block of time, to, I can handle a short session now, which systematically erodes procrastination. Motivation becomes more stable when you weave small wins into your routine because you're not reliant on the occasional spike of excitement. Each mini accomplishment supplies a bit of positive feedback. You set a goal, you completed it, you feel the immediate payoff. This keeps morale afloat, even if the ultimate goal remains months or years away. Without these smaller checkpoints, your interest can wane, lost in the wait for a distant payoff that feels abstract. But daily or weekly minor successes keep your goal tangible and relevant so you stay invested. When you do eventually reach the bigger milestone, it feels like a natural culmination of all those micro achievements rather than a miraculous jump from zero to hero. Tiny wins serve as a buffer against perfectionism's harsh streak. If you typically demand that each piece of work be flawless, you might stall endlessly. But shifting your perspective to, I'll just make some incremental progress, no matter how rough, frees you from that paralyzing expectation. It's easier to let yourself draft a couple of paragraphs when you promise you won't judge them yet. As you accumulate these small steps, you create a rough but evolving body of work or knowledge, which you can refine later. By the time you're ready to polish, you have far more material and experience to build on, saving you the frustration of starting from a blank slate each time you try something new. The confidence boost you get from these small triumphs can gently expand your comfort zone. Perhaps you start by speaking up once in a meeting, or you practice a skill for just a few minutes each morning. Encouraged by those small instances of progress, you later attempt something slightly bolder, leading a short discussion or putting together a full hour of focused practice. Each time you push the boundary just a little and succeed, you rewrite your self-perception from a stance of caution to one of measured boldness. Before you realize it, challenges that once seemed too big to try become the next logical step in your chain of incremental development. Working with deadlines feels less stressful when you factor in these mini milestones. Instead of going full throttle near the final due date, you schedule smaller checkpoints. By day 2, have an outline. By day 5, have a first draft. Each checkpoint is manageable, and as you meet them, you reinforce the notion that you're on pace, preventing that last-minute panic. Ironically, this method often results in higher quality outcomes because you're not rushing all the critical work into a single frenzy. You're able to refine or make changes in between those incremental wins, ensuring by the deadline you have something well developed rather than something hastily finished in a final burst. Sometimes, highlighting these mini accomplishments can transform group dynamics as well. If you're working in a team environment, regularly sharing small goals and celebrating them as they're met fosters a culture of ongoing positivity. People see tangible results, perhaps a completed subtask, a small success story from a client conversation, or a new method that saved time. Instead of only applauding the end product, you keep morale high throughout the process, reinforcing that every piece of progress moves the entire group closer to a collective aim. This approach can stoke enthusiasm and reduce burnout, since nobody is left waiting in a motivational void for a big finale that might be months away. Opportunities to rack up small victories exist in surprising places if you look closely. Tasks that usually feel tedious, like tidying a room, updating files, or drafting emails, can become mini challenges. You set a short window, say 15 or 20 minutes, and see how much you can clear or create in that period. Treat it almost like a personal game. Once the timer ends, you stop and note the result. It might seem trivial, but collecting these little wins transforms routine chores into stepping stones of accomplishment. Over days and weeks, cumulative improvements appear, like a systematically organized workspace or a swifter approach to daily tasks. And that sense of organization can bleed into your larger undertakings. Encouraging someone else to adopt the tiny win approach can reinforce your own commitment. When you explain to a friend or coworker how you've started tackling small pieces at a time, they might try it out themselves. Seeing them light up after completing a small chunk and attributing that spark of satisfaction to the technique you shared further validates your own journey. It becomes a positive feedback loop. The more you see others thrive on the concept, the more devoted you become to it, renewing your focus on the micro steps that bring your personal projects to life. This communal angle can boost accountability too. If you and a friend or team trade daily messages about small tasks accomplished, each day remains punctuated by successful notes. If you track these micro wins digitally or in a journal, patterns may surface about when and how you're most effective. You might discover that early mornings yield your best short bursts of progress, or that late evenings work better for you. Adjusting your schedule to align with these findings further enhances your ability to score small wins consistently. This synergy between timing and bite-sized goals can unlock more efficiency than trying to grind through tasks at arbitrary periods. Over the long run, you build a lifestyle where your energy peaks match the insertion of those mini challenges, resulting in a constant sense of forward momentum. Tiny wins help you manage your mindset when tackling new, unfamiliar territory. Let's say you aspire to learn a new language or skill but feel lost at the start. Instead of setting an unapproachable objective, like total fluency or expert level proficiency, you commit to small daily exercises. Each session ends with a check mark on your log. Completed 10 minutes of practice or learned 5 new words. These micro achievements eventually accumulate into a solid foundation of vocabulary or techniques, demystifying the process. After weeks, the formerly daunting skill seems less intimidating because you're actively building it piece by piece. That transition from intimidation to familiarity is propelled by the immediate feedback loop of small successes, all of which fight the urge to give up early. You might worry that celebrating trivial things comes off as self-congratulatory or naive, but in reality, it nurtures an internal climate that fosters ongoing effort. The difference lies in your understanding. You're not pretending these baby steps solve everything overnight. You're acknowledging them as real strides in a longer journey. This sincerity ensures each mini victory is recognized for what it is, an essential fraction of progress, not a premature finale. That perspective keeps your celebrations humble, yet motivating, safeguarding you from complacency, because you know there's more to do, and from despair, because you see daily reason to be optimistic. Mini wins boost adaptability. When life tosses unexpected changes, a single grand plan might collapse under new constraints. But a strategy anchored in small increments allows you to pivot easily. You can tweak the day's mini goal to fit new conditions. Like if your schedule gets disrupted, you shorten the session instead of canceling it altogether. This flexibility ensures that even in chaotic times, you salvage some progress, preventing a total halt. Over multiple bouts of change, you maintain an overall rhythm of incremental victory, rather than letting external shifts repeatedly knock you off course. And as the weeks roll by, the space between each mini success shrinks, building a near constant stream of positivity. Instead of one highlight at the end of a long stretch, you get multiple highlights sprinkled throughout the process. This repeated emotional reward fosters a habit of consistent engagement because you crave that next boost of I did it. Some liken it to a micro version of finishing a puzzle piece by piece. Each piece clicks into place, giving a mini rush, and though the puzzle remains incomplete, your sense of accomplishment propels you to keep placing more pieces until the entire picture emerges. The same principle can transform tasks and goals that might otherwise seem too big to handle in one go. Eventually, this practice can reshape your overarching outlook on what success feels like day to day. Achievements no longer lie solely at the end of your timeline. They manifest continually, each day offering a chance to move that needle forward. You begin to see each day as an opportunity to notch a few mini wins. And over time, your identity becomes interwoven with consistent incremental progress. That self-identity reduces inertia and fuels further ambition. You don't need to reach perfection tomorrow, just a bit more progress today. And once that mindset crystallizes, it's incredible how quickly those small moves compound, delivering outcomes that once seemed distant fantasies, but now feel like the logical culmination of hundreds of tiny, triumphant steps. Adopting a mindset that values tiny wins can shift how you recuperate from errors. When you perceive every day as a chance for micro accomplishments, stumbling on one step doesn't overshadow everything else. You still have other mini goals to fulfill that same day, allowing you to end it feeling productive rather than defeated. This approach encourages psychological resilience because your emotional investment isn't tied up in one all-important objective. Instead, you distribute that investment across multiple small targets. If you fail to complete one, you still might have succeeded in 2 or 3 other tasks. That safety net of additional successes balances out any single frustration, helping you remain motivated. Even leisure activities can benefit from the notion of small wins. If you've wanted to read more books or explore a hobby, setting tiny, concrete aims, like reading just 5 pages a day or practicing one short exercise on a musical instrument, transforms the vague desire into manageable steps. Rather than feeling you need an entire free afternoon to progress, you see that each micro session is a valid achievement, nudging you closer to a fuller experience of that pastime. The same principle applies to interpersonal relationships. Suppose you want to strengthen bonds with family or friends. You don't necessarily need grand events every week. Instead, consistently scoring small wins could look like sending a thoughtful note one day, making a brief call the next, or planning a quick coffee break. Each act might appear minor on its own, yet it contributes to a continual sense of connection and support. Over time, these small gestures build trust and closeness, often more effectively than sporadic but grand gestures that happen only occasionally. Appreciating small daily progress can reduce the scarcity mindset that often plagues people under stress. When major tasks loom large, it's easy to feel there isn't enough time or that you're always behind. Noticing how you consistently chip away at tasks helps you realize you're actually accomplishing more than you might sense in moments of overwhelm. This recognition eases the internal pressure, allowing you to continue working methodically instead of succumbing to panic or giving up. A similar perspective emerges in skill development. If learning a new craft demands hundreds of hours, fixating on the total can be demoralizing. But practicing for, say, 30 minutes daily means that each session is a concrete win, moving you an inch closer. Over weeks or months, you've stacked dozens of these mini sessions. While each session alone might seem trivial, the aggregate can lead to a noticeable jump in your proficiency. This steady accumulation starkly contrasts with the frustration of trying to tackle large blocks of practice once in a while, and then feeling too drained or busy to maintain consistency. People find that tiny wins foster a lighter, more playful attitude toward challenges. Instead of viewing each hurdle as a solemn test of your capabilities, you see it as an opportunity to eke out another small victory. Even if the victory is just tidying up one component of a broader puzzle, it adds a spark of fun. I got that piece done. What's next? This playful approach can reduce the dread that often accompanies bigger undertakings, because you're essentially turning them into a series of smaller, more enjoyable mini-games. Overcoming procrastination often hinges on letting yourself do just a little bit. When you tell yourself you only have to spend 5 minutes on the dreaded chore, you undermine the usual excuse that you lack time or energy for a major task. 5 minutes is rarely too much to handle. And once started, you often find enough flow to continue beyond the initial target. Even if you do stop after those 5 minutes, it's still a small success, reinforcing the habit of consistent engagement. This pattern can recalibrate your definition of productivity. Instead of equating productivity with marathon work sessions, you begin noticing how much genuine progress surfaces in short, focused intervals. Even scattered throughout a hectic day, these intervals add up. The sense of victory each interval provides keeps your focus sharper than if you tried slogging through one giant stretch of work. Instead of waiting for the perfect, uninterrupted block, you grab mini wins where you can, so your output remains steady and your morale stays relatively high. Some find that with time, these repeated small victories reduce their need for external validation. Rather than waiting for a boss or colleague to acknowledge a big milestone, you steadily gather internal rewards by acknowledging incremental progress. You cultivate a self-reinforcing cycle of, I did this thing at various points during the day. So when external validation eventually arrives, it's a bonus, not the sole source of fulfillment. This autonomy over your sense of achievement bolsters independence and intrinsic motivation. And in setting an example for those around you, family, friends, or coworkers, the culture can shift towards celebrating day-to-day contributions. In a workplace, for example, if leadership adopts a practice of recognizing micro steps, like praising an employee for submitting an early draft or clarifying a client request right away, the overall environment can become more proactive. People feel appreciated not just for final deliverables, but for each action that moves the collective effort forward. If you apply the same principle in your personal life, relationships can strengthen through small gestures. A spontaneous compliment, a short text of gratitude, or tidying up something unasked. Each act is a small victory that benefits both parties, often sparking a reciprocal sense of goodwill. Instead of large, infrequent romantic gestures, you weave consistent micro moments of affection or support into everyday life. This reliability and frequency can mean more in the long run than any single grand display. Tiny wins offer an antidote to information overload. In an era where countless tasks, ideas, and stimuli vie for your attention, focusing on one concise objective at a time can cut through the noise. You say to yourself, right now, I'll just finalize this small portion. That sense of clarity reduces the overwhelm that too many options or obligations can cause, allowing you to channel your mental bandwidth more effectively. You end up with a to-do list that might still be long, but at least each day closes with a handful of mini completions. Over time, the evidence mounts that tiny wins are anything but tiny in their cumulative impact. Even if an individual action seems trivial, like organizing a folder or writing a couple of paragraphs, multiplied across weeks or months, it shapes a massive transformation. People have written entire books in modest daily increments, gotten in shape through incremental exercise, and built thriving ventures by dividing the big vision into small, steady tasks. The pattern is universal. Grand achievements rest on countless mini accomplishments. Steady dedication to small goals provides a gentler emotional path when you face setbacks. You're never placing your entire sense of success on one big push. So if a single day doesn't go as planned, you know tomorrow offers new chances to secure more tiny wins. When unexpected issues arise, like a sudden meeting, a canceled plan, or a personal emergency, you can adapt by adjusting a smaller sub-goal rather than scrapping an entire project. Maybe you shift from a planned 30-minute task to a quick 10-minute version, still salvaging a bit of progress for the day. Over weeks, this resilience evolves into a dependable process. You stop second-guessing whether you'll remain on track because you trust your micro goals to keep you anchored. Even if you scale back on a busy day, you perform a minimal piece of the puzzle, preserving your momentum. The ripple effect can be seen in how you tackle new endeavors. Once you gain confidence that daily increments consistently lead to tangible outcomes, you're bolder about starting something unfamiliar. The intimidation factor fades because you expect to handle it in digestible segments rather than a single monumental effort. This strategy boosts creativity. Knowing you only have to produce a small draft or short sketch today reduces pressure, letting your imagination flow more freely. You can experiment without feeling each attempt must be a masterpiece. Over time, these low-pressure experiments often lead to flashes of insight, forming the backbone of more ambitious works later. It's helpful to remain intentional about your small steps. Random tiny tasks can feel aimless, so you pinpoint which micro actions genuinely contribute to your larger objectives. Whether it's finishing one brief reading related to your field, taking a brief walk to maintain fitness, or decluttering one folder of data, each micro task should tie back to a broader theme or a goal you value. Sometimes you'll discover that small victories pile up faster than you realized. In just a few weeks, you might have completed an entire training module or reorganized a corner of your life that's been messy for years. What felt like an unreachable transformation occurs almost by stealth, thanks to consistent, incremental work. The emotional payoff extends beyond productivity. Celebrating mini achievements each day fosters a generally optimistic demeanor, coloring your outlook with a sense of continual forward motion. This optimism can bleed into your interactions, making collaboration easier and deflecting cynicism because you're visibly getting things done, even if they're small. Self-talk aligns with this practice naturally. Instead of criticizing yourself for what remains undone, you highlight the portion you did accomplish. This gentle shift in inner dialogue preserves morale, making it more likely you'll tackle the next segment eagerly. Over time, you start living in a space of gradual achievement rather than constant self-reproach. In broader goal setting, you might still maintain a lofty vision, starting a business, achieving a professional certification, or writing a lengthy report. Yet each day's plan focuses on a mini chunk. One day you gather resources, another day you refine a short outline, the next you do a quick revision. The knowledge that these small tasks directly feed your big picture dream is incredibly motivating. Knowing you're inching forward daily keeps your commitment alive. This daily pattern has a self-reinforcing feedback loop. A short burst of accomplishment generates a positive mood, which leads to a better session next time around. As the pattern stabilizes, you can layer new mini challenges on top of the old ones, broadening your scope without overwhelming your schedule. Of course, the key is consistency. If you implement small goals sporadically, the impact diminishes. But making them a fixture of your routine cements them into your identity. After a while, it feels strange not to close out the day with one or two short tasks done. It becomes second nature, like brushing your teeth, a self-sustaining habit that's deeply ingrained. As progress accumulates, your environment may shift too. You might declutter spaces piece by piece, leading to an overall organized home or workspace. Or you may notice subtle upgrades in your skill set, like improved confidence in handling projects, because you've polished that skill daily in small intervals rather than cramming. Another benefit is how these small triumphs reduce stress from looming deadlines. By chipping away regularly, you avoid the panic that sets in when a deadline is imminent and almost nothing is done. Instead, you arrive at that date with a heavy portion already handled, and any final polishing feels more like a concluding phase than a desperate salvage effort. People often underestimate how many hours slip through the cracks due to waiting for the perfect moment. Tiny win thinking eliminates that trap. If you're waiting 10 minutes for a meeting or find yourself with a spare quarter hour before dinner, you can fill that slot with a micro task. Over a week, those bits sum up to substantial progress. In uncertain times, those small tasks act as anchors of stability. Even if bigger plans are on hold, you can keep a sense of agency by executing a brief daily routine or clearing a small backlog. That continuity of daily success helps maintain mental health and focus, reminding you that unpredictability doesn't freeze every aspect of life. Such a lifestyle can result in surprising leaps, where after a few months you realize your skill level, project status, or living environment has advanced beyond what you initially deemed possible. This jump appears sudden to outside observers, but you know it's the compounding effect of countless minor completions. Eventually, you start approaching new goals from the outset with this mindset. Plan the major outcome, then divide it into pieces small enough to tackle daily. Each day, you secure a mini win that pushes the effort forward, no matter how minuscule. This method slashes the intimidation factor, fueling a willingness to try bigger dreams, since you trust the process of inching forward regularly. You might discover that energy levels stay more balanced. You don't frequently crash after huge bursts of work because you aren't hoarding tasks for a heroic push at the end. Incremental progress spaces out your workload. This fosters a sustainable pace, ensuring you remain fresh for the next day's tasks and carry less guilt about undone items. Moreover, the enjoyment factor rises. If you once saw tasks as drudgery, sprinkling in tiny successes can transform them into mini challenges. You find satisfaction in each bit of progress, keeping motivation afloat. That positivity can leak into other activities, reshaping your broader mindset into one more attuned to solutions than obstacles. In the end, the real secret behind tiny wins is that they're the fundamental building blocks for any significant transformation. Every big project, career leap, or personal achievement can be dissected into these smaller victories. By focusing on them consciously and celebrating them sincerely, you reinforce a powerful feedback loop of progress, resilience, and satisfaction. Ultimately, tiny wins build the architecture of lasting success. Each day offers a fresh opportunity to reinforce your faith in consistent action. You draw motivation from the knowledge that small but dependable efforts, repeated often, sculpt your life more powerfully than rare moments of intensity. Bit by bit, you move mountains, one handful of earth at a time, until the landscape of your goals has changed forever.